The rifle crack echoed across Marcus's pasture as Karen's hunting party closed in on his prized bulls. She'd waited months for this moment, convinced these dangerous animals needed to be put down for public safety. But as Marcus watched through binoculars from his farmhouse window, a cold smile spread across his weathered face. Karen had made one fatal mistake. She'd never bothered to check what breed his bulls actually were. In 24 hours, her entire world would come crashing down, and Marcus would finally have his revenge against the woman who'd tormented his family for years. The hunt was about to become the hunted. Marcus Hernandez pressed his calloused palm against the cool glass of his kitchen window, watching the silver Mercedes SUV crawl down his gravel driveway like a predator stalking prey. He'd been expecting this visit for weeks. Ever since Karen Whitfield had started her campaign against his ranch at the county meetings. "She's here," he called to his daughter Alina, who was hunched over her laptop at the kitchen table, frantically. Typing emails to livestock attorneys across 3 states, Alina looked up, her dark eyes flashing with the same stubborn fire that had gotten the Hernandez family through 5 generations of ranching in Texas Hill Country. "Did you get the papers from Dr. Morrison?" Marcus patted the manila envelope. "On the counter, right here, every document we need." The Mercedes came to a stop beside his rusted Ford pickup, looking as out of place as a diamond ring in a pig pen. Karen Whitfield emerged from the driver's seat, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the late afternoon sun. Even from 50 yards away, Marcus could see the tight set of her shoulders. The way she surveyed his property, like she was already planning its demolition. 2 men climbed out of the passenger side. Marcus recognized one as Deputy Sheriff Tom Bradley, a weak-willed man who'd bow to anyone with enough political influence. The other was a stranger in an expensive suit, probably another lawyer from Karen's collection. "Remember what we talked about?" Alina whispered, closing her laptop. "Stay calm, don't give her any ammunition." Marcus nodded, but his jaw was already clenching. 3 months ago, Karen had moved into the sprawling McMansion that bordered his ranch's eastern fence line. Within a week, she'd started complaining about the noise from his cattle. Within a month, she was filing formal complaints with the county about public safety hazards. And just last week, she'd stood up at the town hall meeting and declared his bulls a clear and present danger to the entire community. The knock on his front door came sharp and aggressive, like everything else about Karen Whitfield. Marcus opened it to find her standing on his porch, flanked by her 2 companions. Up close, he could see the cold calculation in her pale blue eyes, the way her manicured fingers gripped a thick folder of documents. "Mr. Hernandez," she said, her voice carrying the entitled tone of someone accustomed to getting her way. "I'm here with Deputy Bradley and my attorney, Mr. Langston, to discuss the immediate removal of your dangerous animals." "Afternoon," Karen. Marcus replied evenly. "Gentlemen, what can I do for you?" Karen's smile was razor thin. "Don't play dumb with me. We both know why I'm here. Those bulls of yours are a menace. Yesterday, one of them charged my fence line. While my granddaughter was playing in the yard, she could have been killed." Marcus kept his expression neutral, though he knew for a fact that his bulls were grazing in the far pasture yesterday, nearly half a mile from Karen's property. "Which bull would that be?" "The big black one with the horns," she snapped. "And the brown one. All of them, actually. They're aggressive, unpredictable, and frankly, they don't belong in a residential area." Deputy Bradley shifted uncomfortably. "Now, Marcus, I don't want to get involved in neighbor disputes, but Mrs. Whitfield has filed formal complaints. The county's asking me to investigate." "Investigate what, exactly?" Alina appeared at her father's shoulder, her voice steady but her eyes burning. "Our cattle are properly fenced, vaccinated, and registered. We've been ranching this land since 1847. Karen's attorney stepped forward, a pale man with nervous eyes. "Ms. Hernandez, your family's historical claims are irrelevant. What matters is current zoning regulations and public safety. My client has documented evidence of aggressive behavior from these animals." "Evidence?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" Karen opened her folder with theatrical flourish. Photos of damaged fencing, witness statements from other neighbors, and this, she pulled out a printout of a news article. A story about a similar bull attack in Montana. A child was seriously injured. Marcus glanced at the headline. The article was about an entirely different breed of cattle. and the attack had been the result of negligent handling by inexperienced owners. But he said nothing. Based on this evidence, Karen continued, I'm demanding the immediate removal of all bulls from your property. If you refuse, I'll petition the county for an emergency injunction. And if the county sides with you, Karen's smile widened, then Sheriff's Department will remove them by any means necessary. For public safety, of course. The threat hung in the air like smoke from a grass fire. Marcus had heard whispers around town about Karen's political connections, her donations to the sheriff's re-election campaign, her cozy relationship with the county commissioners. She had the kind of money and influence that could steamroll a working ranch family. I need time to review these documents, Marcus said finally. You have 24 hours, Karen replied. After that, I file for the injunction. And Marcus. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that wouldn't carry to the deputy's ears. I always get what I want. Always. You can do this. The easy way, or you can watch me destroy everything your family has built. Your choice. As the Mercedes disappeared down his driveway, Alina exploded. Dad, she can't do this. Those bulls have been in our family for generations. Toro Negros. Bloodline goes back to the original Spanish imports. And Ferdinand he's gentler than a house cat. Marcus walked to his kitchen counter and picked up the manila envelope, feeling the weight of the documents inside. She thinks she can, Mia. She's got money, connections, and a grudge the size of Texas. But we've got something she doesn't. Know about right, the registry papers. Marcus nodded slowly. That we do, but I'm not sure it'll be enough. Karen Whitfield doesn't strike me as the type to back down just because she's wrong. So what do we do? Marcus stared out the window at his pasture, where Toro Negro stood magnificent in the golden light, his massive frame silhouetted against the Texas sky. The bull had been born on this ranch just like his father and grandfather before him. 5 generations of careful breeding, of preserving bloodlines that connected this land to its deep history. We prepare for war, he said quietly, and we pray that when the smoke clears, we still have a ranch to fight for. That night, Alina stayed up until dawn, making phone calls to agricultural lawyers, breed registry officials, and livestock protection agencies across the country. By morning, she had assembled a stack of documents that could change everything if they could get someone in authority to listen. But Marcus had lived long enough to know that justice and law weren't always the same thing, and Karen Whitfield had made it clear she was playing by her own rules. 23 hours and counting. The injunction arrived at 6:47 a.m., hand-delivered by a nervous-looking court clerk who wouldn't meet Marcus's eyes. Alina read it twice before her face went pale. Emergency removal order, she whispered. Effective immediately. They're coming. Today, Marcus stood on his porch, watching the convoy of vehicles snake up his drive like a funeral procession. 3 Sheriff's Department SUVs led the way, followed by Karen's Mercedes, a livestock trailer, and his blood ran cold a truck with rifle racks, clearly visible in the rear window. Dad Alina's voice was tight with panic. Call Dr. Morrison. Now, but Marcus was already dialing. The phone rang once, twice. You've reached the voicemail of Dr. James Morrison, DVM and Certified Livestock Breed Specialist. I'm currently at the International Cattle Registry Conference in Denver and will return your call. Marcus hung up. Their ace in the hole was sitting in a conference room 2 states away. The convoy parked in a semicircle around his house, engines running, creating a wall of authority and intimidation. Karen emerged from her Mercedes wearing designer jeans and boots that had never seen a day of honest work. Behind her came Deputy Bradley, 2 other deputies Marcus didn't recognize, and a hard-looking man in camouflage with a rifle case slung over his shoulder. Mr. Hernandez, Karen called out, her voice carrying false sympathy. I'm sorry it came to this, but you had your chance to cooperate. Deputy Bradley approached the porch, his hand resting on his service weapon. Marcus, I've got a court order here for the immediate removal of all bulls from your property. You need to step aside and let us do our job. On what grounds? Alina demanded, storming out of the house with a folder of documents. Our cattle are registered, vaccinated, and properly contained. This is harassment, pure and simple. Karen's hired gunman she introduced as wildlife control specialist Roy Hutchin stepped forward. Ma'am, we've got reports of aggressive behavior. These animals pose a clear threat to public safety. Whose reports? Marcus asked. Karen smiled coldly. Mine, Mrs. Patterson from down the road, the mail carrier, the UPS driver. Chidagon? Marcus knew she was lying. Mrs. Patterson was 93 and hadn't left her house in 6 months. Their mail carrier, Jimmy Rodriguez, had been delivering to the ranch for 15 years and often stopped to admire the bulls. But he also knew that Karen's word carried more weight than his in the current political climate. I need to see those cattle, Hutchins said, checking his rifle. Assess the threat level. You're not shooting anything on my property, Marcus said firmly. If they charge, I will, Hutchins replied. I've dealt with aggressive livestock before. Sometimes tranquilizers work, sometimes they don't. Alina stepped between them. Wait, please, just give us 5 minutes to show you something. She ran into the house and emerged with the manila envelope, pulling out a thick stack of papers. These are registry documents. Breed certification, bloodline records going back 12 generations. Deputy Bradley glanced at the papers dismissively. I'm not a livestock expert, Elena. I've got a court order, and I have to follow it. But you don't understand. Elena's voice was rising with desperation. These aren't just any bulls. Toro Negro is a registered retinta andaluza. Ferdinand is a purebred pajuna. These are protected heritage breeds. There are less than 300 of each left in North America. Karen laughed. Protected. By whom? The fairy godmother of cattle. By federal law, Alina shot back. The Livestock Heritage Protection Act. You can't just, I can and I will, Karen interrupted. Those papers don't mean anything if the animals are dangerous. Roy, let's get this done. I have a charity luncheon at noon. The group moved toward the pasture like a hunting party, which Marcus realized with growing horror was exactly what they were. Hutchins had his rifle out, checking the scope. The deputies flanked him, hands on their weapons. Karen walked behind, them filming everything on her phone. This is for documentation, she announced, to show the community that I'm taking decisive action to protect our children. They reached the fence line where Marcus's bulls grazed peacefully in the morning sun. Toro Negro, the magnificent black retinta, lifted his massive head and regarded them with calm brown eyes. Ferdinand, the gentle pajuna, with his distinctive white markings, continued chewing grass, utterly unconcerned by the human drama unfolding around him. Those are the dangerous ones, Deputy Bradley asked, sounding uncertain for the first time. Size can be deceiving, Hutchins said, raising his rifle. Big animals, big damage. I've seen bulls like this gore men to death. Wait, Elena shouted. You can't just shoot them. There are protocols, procedures. Stand back, Miss, one of the other deputies ordered. This is official business. Marcus felt something break inside his chest as he watched Hutchins' sight down his rifle barrel at Toro Negro. The bull stood motionless, sunlight gleaming off his ebony coat, a living piece of history about to be erased by greed and ignorance. Stop, he said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. I said, stop. Marcus's voice carried the authority of 5 generations of ranchers. Men who had fought Apaches, survived the Dust Bowl, and built something lasting from nothing. You want to kill my bulls? Fine. But you're going to do it right. He pulled out his phone and started filming. State your names and the reason you're here. For the record, Karen's smile faltered. What are you doing? Documenting a potential federal crime? Marcus replied calmly. Alina, call the USDA emergency line. Ask for the Heritage Breed Protection Hotline. There's no such thing, Karen snapped. Try me, Marcus, said Roy Hutchins. Is it, what's your wildlife control license number? Your federal authority to destroy protected livestock. Hutchins lowered his rifle slightly. I don't need federal authority for dangerous animals on private property. You do if they're protected heritage breeds, Marcus continued. Federal law supersedes local ordinances when it comes to livestock genetic diversity preservation. Alina, did you reach the USDA? Alina held up her phone. They're transferring me to the emergency response team. For the first time, Marcus saw uncertainty flicker across Karen's face. This is ridiculous. Deputy Bradley, do your job. But Bradley was looking at the peaceful bulls, then at the expensive rifle, then at Marcus's steady gaze. Maybe we should wait for confirmation about these ... heritage breeds. "We're not waiting for anything," Karen snarled. "I have a court order. I have witnesses. I have." Her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID, and her face went white. "Hello, Judge Morrison," she answered sweetly. "Yes, I'm at the Hernandez Ranch right now, taking care of that dangerous livestock situation we discussed." "What? No, I haven't seen... What do you mean, federal marshals?" She ended the call and stared at Marcus with something approaching fear. "Seems Judge Morrison just got a very interesting phone call from the USDA," Marcus said. "Something about an emergency injunction against the emergency injunction. Funny how that works." Karen's carefully constructed authority began to crumble, like a house of cards in a Texas wind. But Marcus knew the real storm was just beginning. The federal marshals arrived in 2 black SUVs, their timing so perfect it felt orchestrated by divine intervention. Marcus watched Karen's face cycle through confusion, anger, and finally dawning terror as the reality of her situation began to sink in. U.S. Marshal Janet Torres stepped out of the lead vehicle, her badge gleaming in the morning sun. She was a compact woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen enough bureaucratic corruption to fill a small library. "Which one of you is Karen Whitfield?" she asked, her voice carrying the flat authority of federal law enforcement. Karen raised her hand like a guilty schoolchild. "I am, but I don't understand why." "Ma'am, you need to lower that weapon immediately," Torres ordered, pointing at Roy Hutchins, who still had his rifle partially raised toward Toro Negro. "He's a licensed wildlife control specialist," Karen protested. "We have a court order." "A court order that's been superseded by federal authority," Torres replied, pulling out her own documents. "Mr. Hutchins, weapon down. Now." Hutchins looked between Karen and the federal marshal, clearly calculating whether his paycheck was worth federal charges. He lowered the rifle. Torres turned to Marcus. "Mr. Hernandez, I'm Marshal Torres, USDA Criminal Investigation Division. We received an emergency alert about potential violations of the Livestock Heritage Protection Act." "That would be us," Elena said, stepping forward with their folder. "These bulls are registered protected heritage breeds, Retenta, Andaluza, and Pajuna, imported bloodlines with fewer than 300 breeding animals left in North America." "I need to see those documents," Torres said. As Elena handed over the papers, Karen found her voice again. "This is ridiculous. These people are making up laws to protect their dangerous animals. I have witnesses. I have video evidence, ma'am." "I'm going to need you to stop talking," Torres interrupted, scanning the registry papers. Her eyebrows rose as she read. "Mr. Hernandez, these are some seriously rare genetics you've got here. When did you register them with the Heritage Breed Conservancy?" "My grandfather registered the original breeding stock in 1962, Marcus replied. "We've maintained continuous registration ever since." Deputy Bradley shifted nervously. "Marshal Torres, I've got a valid court order here. Local jurisdiction gets trumped by federal law when it comes to protected livestock," Torres finished. "Deputy, need you to explain to me how a local judge issued an emergency removal order for federally protected animals without consulting the USDA. Bradley's face went pale. We didn't know they were protected. Mrs. Whitfield said they were dangerous based on what evidence?" Karen stepped forward, her confidence partially restored. "Aggressive behavior, property damage, threat to public safety. I have documentation. Show me." Karen opened her folder and pulled out photos of damaged fencing, but as Torres examined them, her expression grew skeptical. "This damage is on your property." "Yes, caused by these bulls." Obviously, Torres studied the photos more carefully, then looked at the fence line between the properties. "Ma'am, this damage is on the wrong side of the fence. If bulls broke through from the Hernandez property, the damage would be pushed outward. This damage is pushed inward." Elena gasped. She damaged her own fence. "That's absurd," Karen snapped, but her voice lacked conviction. Marshal Torres's second SUV disgorged 2 more agents and a woman in civilian clothes carrying an official briefcase. "Dr. Sarah Chen, USDA Veterinary Services," the woman introduced herself. "I'm here to conduct a behavioral assessment of the animals in question." "Finally, someone with sense," Karen said. "When you see how aggressive they are," Dr. Chen was already walking toward the fence, her movements calm and professional. Toro Negro and Ferdinand approached the fence line with curiosity. their behavior completely relaxed. Dr. Chen extended her hand through the fence, and Toro Negro sniffed it gently before allowing her to scratch behind his ears. These animals show no signs of aggression, Dr. Chen announced. In fact, they're displaying typical docile behavior for well-socialized heritage breeds. Docile. Karen's voice rose to a shriek. That black one charged my fence yesterday. Ma'am, Dr. Chen replied patiently, bulls don't charge fences unless they're being threatened or protecting their herd. What were you doing when this alleged charging occurred? Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Alina pulled out her phone. Actually, I might be able to help with that. Dad, remember when we installed the security cameras last month? Marcus nodded grimly. They'd installed the cameras after several suspicious incidents: feed poisoning, cut fence wire, gates left mysteriously open. At the time, he'd suspected Karen but couldn't prove it. I've got footage from yesterday, Alina continued, scrolling through her phone. Here it is. She held up the phone so everyone could see the screen. The timestamp showed 2:47 p.m. the previous day. In the video, Karen could be seen approaching the fence line carrying a long stick. She began poking it through the fence, clearly trying to agitate the bulls. Toro Negro approached to investigate, and Karen began shouting and waving the stick aggressively. She was trying to provoke them, Elena said incredulously. Marshal Torres took the phone and watched the video again. Mrs. Whitfield, this footage shows you deliberately attempting to agitate these animals. That's animal harassment, which is a federal crime when it involves protected heritage breeds. Karen's lawyer, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, finally spoke up. My client was simply testing the animal's temperament for public safety purposes. By poking them with a stick, Dr. Chen asked. That's not how behavioral assessments work. The second marshal approached Torres and whispered something in her ear. Torres nodded grimly. Mrs. Whitfield, we've also been informed of some irregularities in how you obtained your court order. Judge Morrison received a call this morning from our legal department. Apparently, you failed to disclose that these were protected heritage breeds when you filed your petition. How was I supposed to know? Karen demanded. The registry information is public record, Torres replied. Any competent attorney would have checked before filing, unless, of course, you deliberately withheld that information from the court. Karen's lawyer had gone very quiet, clearly realizing that his client had potentially involved him in fraud. Furthermore, Torres continued, we've discovered that your property purchase came with a signed agricultural easement, acknowledging the presence of livestock on the adjacent property. You signed a document stating you had no objection to the cattle operation? That's different. I didn't know they were dangerous. Ma'am, the evidence suggests you knew they weren't dangerous and deliberately created a false narrative to have them removed. Torres gestured to the video on Elena's phone. This shows premeditation. Roy Hutchins, who had been standing quietly with his rifle, suddenly spoke up. Ma'am, I think I need to go. This ain't what I signed up for. You're not going anywhere, Karen hissed. I paid you to do a job. You paid me to handle dangerous animals, Hutchins replied. These bulls aren't dangerous, and now there's federal agents involved. I'm out. He walked back to his truck, leaving. Karen, standing alone with her crumbling case and increasingly nervous legal representation, Deputy Bradley cleared his throat. Marshal Torres, what do you need from us? I need you to arrest Mrs. Whitfield for filing false police reports, animal harassment, and conspiracy to destroy protected federal assets. Karen's face went white. You can't arrest me. I'm a pillar of this community. I donate to the sheriff's campaign. Ma'am, you just confessed to bribing a public official, Torres said with grim satisfaction. Deputy Bradley, I believe you have. Probable cause. As the handcuffs clicked around Karen's wrists, she looked at Marcus with pure hatred. This isn't over. Hernandez, I have connections you can't imagine. I'll destroy you and your pathetic little ranch. But Marcus was smiling. Now, a cold smile that carried 5 generations of stubborn Texas pride. Karen, you just made the biggest mistake of your life. You see, there's something else you didn't bother to check about my bulls. What? She snarled. They're not just protected heritage breeds, Marcus said quietly. They're also worth about $50,000 each to the right collector. And you just tried to have them killed on federal record. The color drained from Karen's face as the full scope of her legal jeopardy became clear. 3 hours later, Marcus sat in the county courthouse waiting room, watching Karen's high-powered attorney pace the marble floor like a caged animal. Word had spread fast through the small Texas town the woman, who'd terrorized local ranchers, with frivolous lawsuits, had finally bitten off more than she could chew. Alina emerged from the district attorney's office with a satisfied smile. "They want to settle," she announced. "What kind of settlement?" Marcus asked. "Full restitution, for damages, legal fees, and emotional distress, plus a formal apology published in the county newspaper." Alina paused, her smile widening. "And they want to discuss Karen's other ... activities." The door to the DAS office opened, and District Attorney Rebecca Martinez stepped out, followed by Marshal Torres and a man Marcus didn't recognize, tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Mr. Hernandez," DA Martinez said, "I'd like you to meet Federal Prosecutor James Whitman. He's here about some broader issues that have come to light during our investigation." Whitman shook Marcus's hand with the firm grip of a man accustomed to dealing with serious criminals. "Mr. Hernandez, your case has opened up a much larger investigation. It seems Mrs. Whitfield has been very busy." "How busy?" "In the past 18 months, she's filed harassment complaints against 12 different property owners in this county. All of them were small farmers or ranchers. All of them were forced to sell their land to avoid lengthy legal battles." Eyes narrowed. "Let me guess, someone bought up all that land at below-market prices." "White Rock Development Corporation," Whitman confirmed. "Registered in Delaware, but the beneficial owner is ... double quotes." He paused, dramatically. "Karen Whitfield." Marcus felt the pieces clicking together like bullets sliding into a revolver chamber. "She's been running a land grab operation." "Exactly. File nuisance complaints, tie people up in legal proceedings they can't afford, force them to sell cheap, then develop the land for massive profits. It's not technically illegal, but when you add in the falsified evidence, perjury, and conspiracy charges, ... How much land are we talking about?" Alina asked. "Over 4,000 acres, Torres replied. "Conservative estimate of current value, $15 million. Marcus whistled low, and she almost pulled it off. "She would have, if you hadn't fought back," Whitman said. "Most of her victims were elderly farmers who couldn't afford legal representation. But you had something. She couldn't account for protected heritage breeds. Protected heritage breeds with impeccable documentation, and a daughter who knew how to work the system." Whitman gestured toward Alina. "Your call to the USDA emergency hotline triggered an automatic federal response. Once we started digging, we found a pattern. The courthouse door burst open, and Karen's attorney Robert Langston, according to the nameplate on his briefcase, approached their group with desperation written across his face. Prosecutor Whitman: I'd like to discuss a plea arrangement. For my client, I'm listening. Full cooperation with the investigation. Complete asset forfeiture to compensate victims. In exchange for reduced charges and minimum security incarceration, Whitman considered this. What kind of cooperation? Names, dates, financial records, everything. Mrs. Whitfield kept detailed records of her ... operations. She documented her own crimes, Alina asked incredulously. Langston's professional mask slipped slightly. My client is many things, but she's not disorganized. She has spreadsheets showing projected profits from each property acquisition, correspondence with shell companies, even recordings of conversations with local officials. Marshal Torres raised an eyebrow. Recordings she was paranoid about being double-crossed by her co-conspirators. Recorded everything as insurance. Marcus realized they were witnessing something bigger than a simple neighbor dispute. How many officials? 2 county commissioners, 3 city council members, a judge, and ... Langston swallowed hard. Sheriff Patterson. Da Martinez went. Very still, she recorded Sheriff Patterson. Multiple conversations discussing how to expedite court orders, which deputies would be most cooperative, how to handle any problem property owners who might fight back too hard. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of Marcus's phone buzzing. He glanced at it and saw a text from his neighbor, Jim Rodriguez, watching the news. They're saying Karen got arrested at your place. Is it true she's going to prison? Mr. Hernandez, Whitman said, I need you to understand something. Your case is going to be the centerpiece of a much larger prosecution. Mrs. Whitfield's organization has been systematically defrauding farmers and ranchers across 3 counties. The total damages could exceed $50 million. What does that mean for us? It means you're heroes, Alina said softly. You stopped her. It also means, Torres added, that Mrs. Whitfield is going to face serious federal time. Wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, falsifying federal documents, attempted destruction of protected assets. We're looking at 20 to 30 years minimum. The courthouse door opened again, and this time Karen herself appeared, flanked by 2 U.S. Marshals. She was still in handcuffs, her designer clothes wrinkled, her perfect hair disheveled. When she saw Marcus, her face twisted with rage. "This is your fault," she screamed across the lobby. "You pathetic little man with your worthless cows. I could have made this county something special by stealing land from families who've worked it for generations." Marcus replied calmly, "By bringing progress, development, jobs." Karen's voice echoed off the marble walls. "Instead of your backward, primitive way of life," Dr. Chen, who had been quietly observing from a chair, stood up. "Mrs. Whitfield, those worthless cows represent genetic diversity that took centuries to develop. Toro Negro's bloodline can be traced back to cattle that came to the Americas with the Spanish conquistadors. Ferdinand's genetics are so rare that the European Union has offered Mr. Hernandez $75,000 for breeding rights." Karen's mouth fell open. "75,000 for 1 bull each," Dr. Chen clarified. "The Hernandez Ranch is sitting on nearly $500,000 worth of irreplaceable genetic material. You tried to have them killed over a property dispute." The marshals began leading Karen away, but she dug in her heels for one final outburst. "You think you've won? You think this is over? I have friends in Austin, in Washington. Isla Pio. I'll fight this." "Oh, ma'am," Marshal Torres interrupted gently. "Your friends in Austin are currently being arrested. Your shell companies have been frozen. Your assets are being seized. And those recordings you made, they implicate a lot of powerful people who are now very angry with you." As Karen was led away, still shouting threats and promises of revenge, Prosecutor Whitman turned to Marcus. "Mr. Hernandez, there's one more thing you should know." "What's that?" "Mrs. Whitfield's development company had plans for your property specifically. They were going to build a luxury shopping complex called Heritage Ranch Plaza. The irony is, ... thick." Alina started laughing, a sound that began as nervous relief and built into something approaching hysteria. Heritage Ranch Plaza. She was going to destroy actual heritage livestock to build a fake heritage shopping center. "The marketing materials are quite detailed," Whitman said dryly. "Authentic Western theming, rustic charm, family values. All built on the bones of the real thing." Marcus looked out the courthouse window toward his ranch, where Toro, Negro, and Ferdinand were peacefully grazing in the afternoon sun, blissfully unaware that they had just helped bring down a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now," Whitman smiled. "Now you go home to your bulls, and Mrs. Whitfield learns what happens when you mess with the wrong Texas rancher." But as they walked out of the courthouse, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that Karen's final threat wasn't just the desperate raving of a defeated woman. Something in her eyes suggested she still had cards left to play. The attack came at 3:17 a.m. on a moonless Tuesday night, 2 weeks after Karen's arrest. Marcus jolted awake to the sound of his border collie, Scout, barking frantically from the front porch. Through his bedroom window he could see an orange glow that didn't belong in the darkness. "Alina," he shouted, grabbing his rifle from the gun safe. "Fire!" But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't a simple barn fire. The flames were too controlled, too deliberate. Someone had set multiple fires simultaneously: the hay barn, the equipment shed, and most devastatingly, the feed storage building that housed winter supplies for his entire herd. Alina burst into his room, already dressed and carrying her phone. "I called 911, but the closest fire department is 20 minutes away. Dad, look at the pasture." Marcus followed her gaze and felt his blood freeze. In the dancing firelight, he could see dark figures moving through his pasture, driving his cattle toward the far fence line with flashlights and noisemakers. But it wasn't random rustling. They were systematically separating Toro, Negro, and Ferdinand from the rest of the herd. There after the bulls, he breathed. His phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, Marcus." Karen's voice was calm, almost cheerful. "Enjoying the fireworks? Where are you calling from?" "Let's just say I have friends in low places." "Did you really think a few federal charges would stop me? I've been planning contingencies since the day I bought the property next to yours." Through the window, Marcus watched the figures in his pasture successfully isolate his 2 prize bulls. They had professional equipment cattle prods, portable panels, even a small livestock trailer hidden in the darkness beyond the fence line. "What do you want, Karen?" "I want you to understand that you can't humiliate me and walk away. I want you to watch everything you love burn. And then I want you to spend the rest of your life knowing you could have prevented it. The feds will find you." "This is only making things worse." Karen's laugh was cold as winter wind. "The feds think I'm in a federal holding cell in Austin. Amazing what money can buy, isn't it? A few corrupted guards, a staged medical emergency, a transfer that never quite makes it to its destination." Alina was frantically trying to reach Marshal Torres, but her calls went straight to voicemail. Marcus realized with growing horror that Karen had planned this perfectly. A night when the federal protection would be minimal, when the local authorities were compromised, when help would be too far away to matter. "You can't steal federal assets," Marcus said, still watching the figures load his bulls into the trailer. "Those animals are tracked, registered, monitored, were tracked," Karen corrected. "But livestock transportation records can be altered. Heritage breed documentation can be falsified. And there are collectors in certain South American countries who pay very well for rare genetics, no questions asked." The truth hit Marcus like a physical blow. "You're going to sell them overseas. I'm going to erase them, along with their bloodlines, their genetics, and any evidence that the great Marcus Hernandez ever stood up to me. By tomorrow morning, Toro Negro and Ferdinand will be on a cargo plane to Colombia, and you'll be explaining to the federal prosecutors how you lost the centerpiece of their case." Alina grabbed his arm. "Dad, we have to stop them." But Marcus could see it was already too late. The trailer was loaded, the engine starting. The arsonists were retreating to their own vehicles, their work complete. In 15 minutes, there would be nothing left but burning buildings and missing cattle. "Karen," he said into the phone, "you're making a mistake." "Am I?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like I'm about to disappear with $50 million in stolen land deals, while you're left with a pile of ashes and a federal investigation that just lost its key evidence." The convoy of vehicles began moving down the ranch road, red taillights disappearing into the darkness. Marcus felt 5 generations of family history crumbling around him. The bulls weren't just livestock, they were living links to his heritage, irreplaceable genetic treasures that had survived wars, droughts, and economic disasters, only to be stolen by a sociopathic real estate developer. "You know what your problem is, Marcus?" Karen's voice continued through the phone. "You think being right matters. You think justice exists. But power is the only thing that matters, and I have more power than you ever will." Alina was crying. Now, watching the flames consume their winter feed supplies, the fire department sirens were finally audible in the distance. But Marcus knew they'd arrived too late to save anything that mattered. "Goodbye, Marcus," Karen said. "Enjoy explaining to your daughter how you lost everything because you were too proud to back down." The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone, feeling the weight of defeat settle on his shoulders like a funeral shroud. Karen had one. She'd burned his ranch, stolen his bulls, and escaped federal custody. In a few hours, the media would report on the tragic fire that destroyed a local ranch, and there would be nothing left to prove that Karen Whitfield had ever committed a crime. But then Alina looked up from her own phone, and Marcus saw something. In her eyes, that stopped his despair cold. "Dad," she said quietly, "Karen made one mistake." "What?" Alina held up her phone, showing him a GPS tracking app. "Remember when we had Dr. Chen microchip the bulls for the federal registration process? The chips don't just identify them, they broadcast location data to the Heritage Breed Conservation Database." Marcus felt hope flicker back to life. "We can track them?" "Better than that," Alina said, her smile returning. "I've been monitoring their location for the past 5 minutes, and I just sent their coordinates to every federal agency in the Southwest, along with a recording of Karen's phone call." "You recorded the call." "Dad, I'm 26 years old. I record everything." Elena's fingers flew across her phone screen. Karen thinks she's so smart, but she just confessed to federal escape, livestock theft, arson, and international smuggling on a call that's automatically backed up to 3 different cloud servers. In the distance, Marcus could hear helicopters approaching, not news choppers, but the heavy military rotors of federal law enforcement. The sky began to brighten with searchlights. As the manhunt began, "Karen wanted to teach me about power," Marcus said, watching the federal response mobilize around his burning ranch. But she forgot that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let someone destroy themselves. Elena nodded, still tracking the GPS signals on her phone. The trailer just stopped moving. "Looks like they're about to meet some very unhappy federal agents." Marcus put his arm around his daughter's shoulders as the fire trucks finally arrived, their sirens wailing like a funeral dirge for Karen's criminal empire. The bulls might be safe, but he had a sinking feeling that Karen's desperation would drive her to one final, dangerous act. The standoff lasted 6 hours. Karen had barricaded herself in an abandoned grain silo 15 miles from the Mexican border, her stolen cattle trailer surrounded by every federal agency in Texas. From his position behind a FBI command vehicle, Marcus watched through binoculars as negotiators tried to talk her down. "She's got nothing left to lose," Marshal Torres said grimly. "Escaped federal custody, arson, theft of protected assets, attempted international smuggling. She's looking at life in prison." Elena monitored the GPS signals on her phone. Toro Negro and Ferdinand are still in that trailer. They've been locked up for 8 hours without water or ventilation. "If this goes on much longer, the animals are our priority," Dr. Chen confirmed, adjusting her veterinary equipment. "But we can't approach while she's armed and unstable." Through the command radio, they could hear snippets of the negotiation. Karen was ranting about corruption, about powerful friends who would protect her, about how the whole system was rigged against successful people like herself. But Marcus could hear the hysteria creeping into her voice, the gradual realization that her carefully constructed world of bribes and connections had finally collapsed. "She's breaking down," FBI negotiator Lisa Park reported. "Classic narcissistic collapse. When people like this lose control, they either surrender completely or ... double quotes or what?" Elena asked. "Or they try to take everyone down with them. I want to speak to Marcus Hernandez. Bring him to the perimeter." Now Marshal Torres shook his head. "Absolutely not. She's unstable and has nothing to lose." "Dad?" "No." Elena grabbed his arm. "It's too dangerous." But Marcus was already walking toward the perimeter, ignoring the protests of federal agents. He'd spent 73 years on Texas ranches, dealing with everything from rattlesnakes to tornadoes. He wasn't about to let a spoiled real estate developer frighten him now. "Karen," he called out when he reached the yellow tape. "I'm here. Let's talk." The silo door cracked open, and Karen appeared, her expensive clothes torn and dirty, her perfect hair wild with desperation. She was holding a pistol in one hand and something that looked like a detonator in the other. "Do you see what your stubborn pride has cost?" "I see a woman who got caught stealing from hardworking families," Marcus replied. "I see someone who chose greed over decency. I was bringing progress to this backward county. Jobs, development. Those people were nothing. Farmers, ranchers, people who never amounted to anything. I could have made this place something." Special Elena had followed him to the perimeter, staying just behind the FBI negotiator. "Karen," she called out, "it's over. This silo is full of old grain dust. One spark, and everything within 100 yards goes up like a Roman candle, including your precious bulls." The FBI sniper teams shifted position, but Marcus knew they couldn't take the shot knot with the detonator in her hands. Karen had engineered the perfect Mexican standoff. "What do you want?" Marcus asked. "I want my life back. I want the charges dropped. I want safe passage to a non-extradition country." Karen's voice was rising to a shriek. "And I want you to admit that you were wrong to fight me." Marcus studied her face, seeing the desperation beneath the rage. This was a woman who had never heard the word no in her entire privileged life, who had never faced real consequences for her actions. Now, confronted with the collapse of everything she'd built through corruption and manipulation, she was like a child throwing a tantrum with dynamite. Karen, he said gently, you know, none of that's going to happen. Then we all die together. She raised the detonator. You, me, your bulls. And anyone else stupid enough to. The shot came from Agent Park's secondary sniper, positioned on a water tower 200 yards away. It was a perfect headshot that dropped Karen instantly, the detonator flying from her dead hand to clatter harmlessly on the concrete. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Toro Negro lowing plaintively from inside the trailer. Someone get those animals out of there, Dr. Chen ordered, rushing toward the trailer with her medical kit. Even in death, her face was twisted with the rage and entitlement that had driven her to destroy so many lives. Dad, Alina touched his shoulder. You okay? Marcus nodded slowly. I keep thinking about what she said. About bringing progress, about making this place something special. You mean her shopping mall plan? No, I mean, Marcus gestured toward the horizon where the sun was setting over miles of Texas rangeland. This place already is something special. Always has been. She just couldn't see it. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the same courthouse where Karen's empire had first begun to crumble. But this time he was there for a celebration. The Heritage Breed Conservation Foundation was presenting him with their Lifetime Achievement Award for protecting genetic diversity in American livestock. The Hernandez family's dedication to preserving rare Spanish bloodlines represents the best of American agricultural tradition. The presenter announced, thanks to their vigilance and courage, future generations will have access to genetic resources that might otherwise have been lost forever. Alina leaned over and whispered, they're also presenting you with a check for $150,000 from the Heritage Breed Emergency Fund, compensation for the fire damage and trauma to the animals. Marcus nodded, but his attention was focused on the back of the courtroom, where a dozen other ranchers and farmers sat, all of them victims of Karen's land grab scheme, all of them getting their property back as the courts unwound her criminal enterprise. Old Mrs. Patterson, Jimmy Rodriguez, the mail carrier who had almost been fired for refusing to lie about aggressive cattle behavior, gave him a thumbs up. After the ceremony, Federal Prosecutor Whitman pulled Marcus aside. Thought you'd want to know we've recovered over $47 million in stolen assets. Every family Karen victimized is getting full restitution, plus damages. What about her co-conspirators? Sheriff Patterson resigned and flipped for immunity. The corrupt county commissioners are looking at federal time. Judge Morrison, well, let's just say his retirement is going to be very uncomfortable. Alina joined them, carrying a folder of documents. Dad, Dr. Chen wants to discuss expanding our breeding program. Apparently, the European Union is offering $200,000 for exclusive access to Ferdinand's genetics. Marcus chuckled. That bull's turning into quite the celebrity. Both of them are, Whitman said. Your story made national news. Texas rancher stops criminal empire to save heritage bulls. CNN wants to do a documentary. As long as they don't want to film during calving season, Marcus replied. Some things are more important than television. That evening, Marcus stood at his pasture fence, watching Toro Negro and Ferdinand graze peacefully in the golden light. The fire damage had been repaired, the stolen equipment replaced, and life on the ranch had returned to its ancient rhythms. Alina joined him, leaning against the fence rail. Any regrets, Dad, about fighting her, instead of just selling out? Marcus considered the question, watching his bulls move with the quiet dignity that had made them worth preserving for 5 centuries. Karen thought power came from money and connections. But real power comes from knowing who you are and standing for something that matters, even when it's dangerous. Especially when it's dangerous. Marcus smiled at his daughter. Your grandmother used to say that some things are worth more than money. Took me 73 years to understand what she meant. A truck turned into their driveway, Dr. Morrison. Finally back from his conference, coming to check on the bulls, who had become the most famous cattle in Texas. Behind him, a news van from the local station was arriving to film a follow-up story. About the Heritage Ranch heroes. Think you're ready for all this attention? Alina asked. Marcus chuckled, adjusting his worn hat. I survived Karen Whitfield. I reckon I can handle a few reporters. As the sun set over the Texas hill country, Toro Negro lifted his massive head and looked toward the house, his dark eyes reflecting the dying light. For a moment, Marcus could swear the bull understood everything that had happened, everything that had been preserved, and everything that would continue long after the last criminal was sentenced and the last news camera packed away. Some things, Marcus thought, were indeed worth fighting for.